The first gunshot cracked like winter breaking a tree branch. The second one made me stop skinning the elk. I was 200 yards up the ridge, hands sticky with blood and frost, when the sound cut through the Smoky Mountains. November 1883 had brought snow early that year, thick and merciless, blanketing the Tennessee high country in silence, so complete you could hear your own heartbeat, until someone decided to shatter it with gunfire. I stood there, knife in hand, listening. The wind carried voices next, men shouting, and then something else, a woman screaming. My first instinct was to ignore it. 2 years in these mountains had taught me one fundamental truth. Other people's trouble stays other people's trouble. I'd climbed this high to escape exactly that kind of entanglement. Up here, there were no complications, no betrayals, no death that couldn't be explained by weather or wildlife. Just me, the peaks, and enough silence to drown out memory. But that scream, it sounded like her. I shook my head, trying to clear it. Anna had been dead for 2 years. Fever took her in 3 days, left me with nothing but a hole in my chest and a rage I didn't know what to do with. That scream couldn't be her, but my hands were already moving, wiping the blade clean on my buckskin pants, reaching for the Winchester rifle propped against the pine tree. I told myself I was just going to look, see what the commotion was about. Maybe scare off whoever was causing trouble and get back to my elk before the meat froze solid. That's what I told myself. But deep down, in the part of me I'd tried to bury under 2 years of isolation, I knew I was lying. The moment I heard that woman scream, I'd already made my choice. I worked my way down the slope, boots finding purchase on icy ground, rifle ready. The shooting had stopped, but I could hear horses now, stamping and snorting in the cold. Men's voices carried up through the trees, rough and unconcerned, the kind of voices that belonged to people who thought they owned the world and everything in it. When I reached the edge of the ravine, I saw it all laid out below me like a painting of hell. A wagon lay on its side, one wheel still spinning slowly, creaking in the quiet. A chestnut mare thrashed in the traces, panicking, her breath coming in great clouds of steam. 3 men on horseback surrounded the wreck, and pinned beneath the overturned wagon bed, barely visible in the snow, was a woman. Even from this distance I could see she was pregnant, maybe 6 months, maybe 7. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins and spread across the white ground like spilled ink. She wasn't screaming anymore, just lying there, one hand pressed to her belly, the other reaching toward something I couldn't see. The 3 men were arguing. I couldn't make out all the words, but I caught enough. They were debating whether to pull her out or leave her. One of them wanted to search her bags first. Another said it was too risky. Too many witnesses might come along. The third one, the biggest, just laughed and said, "Dead women don't testify." That's when I recognized him, Jesse Kohler. I'd seen him twice before, both times in Gatlinburg, both times standing too close to Judge Harlan Voss like a dog waiting for scraps. Jesse was the kind of man who did the dirty work other people didn't want on their hands, the kind who smiled while he hurt you. I didn't think. Thinking was for men who had something to lose. I raised the Winchester and fired once into the air. The boom echoed across the ravine like thunder, sharp and final. All 3 men jerked their heads up, searching for the source. I fired again, this time close enough that snow kicked up near Jesse's horse. The animal reared, nearly throwing him. "Next one finds flesh," I called out, my voice carrying the authority of a man who never bluffed. Jesse fought his horse under control, eyes scanning the tree line until they found me. Even at this distance, I saw recognition flicker across his face. His hand dropped to the pistol at his hip, and for a moment I thought he might actually be stupid enough to draw. But the man next to him, smaller and smarter, grabbed Jesse's arm and said something I couldn't hear. They exchanged looks, the kind of looks men share when they're calculating odds and don't like the numbers. Jesse spat into the snow, then yanked his horse's head around. The other 2 followed suit. Within seconds, they were riding hard down the trail, disappearing into the timber like smoke. I waited until I couldn't hear the hoofbeats anymore. Then I waited another full minute, because men like Jesse sometimes doubled back to see if you'd lower your guard. When I was sure they were truly gone, I descended the ravine in long, controlled slides, using saplings to break my momentum. Up close, the situation looked worse. The wagon had hit a patch of ice and gone over sideways, hard enough to crack one of the axles. The mare was cut and bleeding from the traces, eyes rolling white with terror. I approached her first, speaking soft and low the way Anna used to with frightened animals. The horse settled slightly under my voice, enough that I could get close and cut the traces with my knife. She limped away into the trees, trailing blood. I hated to let her go injured like that, but I had more pressing concerns. The woman beneath the wagon was conscious. Her green eyes tracked my movements as I dropped to my knees beside her. She was young, maybe 26 or 27, with a face that would have been pretty if it wasn't so pale with shock. Her dress was good quality, but travel-worn, and her belly showed clear even under her winter coat. "Hold still," I said, keeping my voice level. "Where does it hurt?" "My leg," she gasped. The words came out tight with pain. "Can't feel my leg." The wagon bed had her pinned from the waist down. I examined the situation quickly, mentally calculating angles and weight distribution. If I lifted wrong, the whole thing could shift and crush her worse. But the snow was melting where her body heat touched it, and I could see she was shaking hard, going into shock. I needed to move fast. "What's your name?" I asked, already moving to brace the wagon. "Sarah?" she managed. "Sarah Claire Ashford." "Well, Sarah Claire Ashford, I'm going to lift this off you now. When I do, you pull yourself free. Can you do that?" She nodded, teeth chattering. I positioned myself, set my feet, and heaved. The muscles in my back and shoulders screamed as I took the weight of the wagon. It lifted 6 inches, then a foot. Sarah dragged herself backward through the snow, crying out when her leg came free. I could see it was bent at a bad angle below the knee, but there was no time to examine it properly. I let the wagon down carefully and went to her. Her left leg was definitely broken. Clean break by the look of it, but painful. Her face had gone the color of old milk. When I checked her belly with gentle hands, feeling for the hardness that would mean internal bleeding, she seemed intact. The baby was moving under my palm, strong kicks like it was angry about being jostled. "The baby," she whispered, and there was so much fear in those 2 words that something in my chest twisted. "Baby feels fine to me," I said. "Strong, but we need to get you warm and get that leg set." I looked at the sky. The clouds had that heavy, yellowish quality that promised more snow, probably by nightfall. My cabin was a mile from here, straight up through terrain that would be brutal even for a healthy person. But it was the only option. I couldn't take her down to Gatlinburg. Not with Jesse and his friends out there somewhere, probably regrouping and deciding whether to come back and finish what they'd started. "Can you ride?" I asked. "I think so." The mare was beyond saving. One of her front legs was broken, and she thrashed in agony just beyond the wagon. I hated this part, always had, but there was no mercy in leaving her to suffer. I drew my pistol and put her down with 1 shot, quick and clean. Sarah flinched at the sound, but said nothing. I gathered what I could from the wreckage. Most of her belongings were ruined or scattered beyond finding, but I salvaged a carpet bag with some clothes. And then I found something that made me pause. The bag was heavy, heavier than clothes should make it. When I looked inside, I saw bundles of papers, legal documents, by the look of them, land deeds, survey maps, and a sealed letter addressed to Federal Land Commission, Nashville. "Who are you running from?" I asked, turning to look at her. Sarah's eyes were already starting to lose focus, pain and shock dragging her under. "Everyone," she whispered. Before I could ask what that meant, her eyes rolled back and she went limp. I strapped everything to my pack, then lifted Sarah as carefully as I could. She was light in my arms, too light for a woman 7 months pregnant. I could feel her trembling, going deeper into shock. I needed to move fast. The climb back to my cabin took 40 minutes that felt like hours. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes mumbling words I couldn't make out. Once she said a name, William. She said it like a prayer, like an apology. I didn't ask who William was. Wasn't my business. My business was getting her somewhere warm before she and that baby died in my arms. My cabin sat in a clearing halfway up the next ridge, built from squared logs and chinked with moss. Smoke rose from the stone chimney. I'd banked the fire that morning before heading out to hunt, but it would still be warm inside. I carried Sarah through the door and laid her on the bed. It was a simple frame strung with rope and covered with deer hides and wool blankets. The only bed in the cabin. I'd be sleeping on the floor tonight. The cabin was one room, maybe 20 feet square. Rough furniture I'd made myself. Hunting gear hung on the walls, alongside drying herbs and strips of venison. It smelled like wood smoke and leather and the wild medicines I gathered from the forest. It was spare and plain and utterly without comfort. But it was warm. Sarah's eyes opened briefly as I laid her down, taking in her surroundings with a kind of dazed confusion. "You live here?" she asked. "Alone?" "2 years now." I built up the fire, adding larger logs until heat began to fill the room. Then I put water on to boil and mixed a tea from willow bark and mint. The willow would help with pain. The mint would settle her stomach. I'd learned these things from Anna, back when there was still an Anna to learn from. "Drink this," I said, helping Sarah sit up enough to take the cup. "It'll help." She took it in trembling fingers and sipped, made a face at the bitterness but kept drinking. While the tea did its work, numbing her pain and warming her from the inside, I gathered what I needed to set her leg. Straight branches. Strips of cloth torn from an old shirt. Leather cord. "This is going to hurt," I warned her. "Everything hurts already," she said. But there was steel under the words. This woman had been hurt before and survived it. I gave her a leather strap to bite down on, then set to work. The bone went back into place with a sound that made my stomach turn. Sarah bit down hard, but didn't scream. When it was done and the leg was splinted tight, she lay back exhausted, sweat beading her forehead despite the cold. "Thank you," she managed. I nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. "You should rest now." "Those men," she said, fighting to keep her eyes open. "They were trying to kill me. I figured. You saved my life." I shrugged. "Anybody would have done the same." "I don't think that's true." She looked at me with those green eyes, and I had the uncomfortable feeling she was seeing more than I wanted to show. "What's your name?" "Elijah Thorne. Folks used to call me Eli." "Used to? Haven't been around folks in a while." "Why not?" It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Because my wife died. Because I killed 2 men and ran. Because down there in the world, I was Elijah Thorne, husband and neighbor and carpenter, and that man died the same day Anna did. Because up here I could be nobody and nobody couldn't hurt any more. "Just preferred the quiet," I said instead. Sarah nodded like she understood, though I doubted she did. Then her eyes drifted to the carpet bag I'd set by the door. "My things. Did you bring my things?" "What I could carry." "There's a bag. Papers inside. I need them." "They're safe." Relief washed over her face, so profound it was almost painful to watch. Whatever was in those papers, it meant more to her than her own life. Maybe even more than the baby she was carrying. "Who's William?" I asked. Her face crumpled. "My husband. He died 7 months ago." The timeline clicked into place. Pregnant, 7 months. Husband dead 7 months. She'd gotten pregnant right before he died, or maybe right after, and now she was out here in the middle of nowhere, running from men with guns, carrying papers important enough to die for. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. I knew what it was like to lose a spouse, knew the particular kind of emptiness it left behind. "Me too." She touched her belly gently. "He never got to know about the baby." We sat in silence after that. Outside, the wind picked up. Snow began to fall, visible through the cabin's single window. Big, wet flakes that would pile up fast. I'd been right about the storm. "You'll need to stay here tonight," I said. Maybe tomorrow too, depending on the weather. When it clears, I'll take you down to Gatlinburg. I can't go to Gatlinburg. Why not? She looked at me with eyes full of fear and something harder, determination maybe, or desperation. Because the men who run that town want me dead. Before I could ask what she meant, there was a sound outside. Horses. Multiple horses, approaching slow and careful. I grabbed my rifle and moved to the window. Through the falling snow, I could see shapes. 4 riders picking their way up the trail toward my cabin. "Get down," I said to Sarah. "Stay quiet." She struggled to obey, rolling off the bed onto the floor behind it, one hand pressed to her mouth to stifle any sound. I moved to the door, rifle ready. The horses stopped maybe 20 feet from the cabin, close enough to talk, far enough to make a quick escape if they needed to. A voice called out through the snow, smooth and cultured and utterly out of place in these wild mountains. "Mr. Thorne, I know you're in there, and I know you have something that belongs to me." I didn't answer, just waited. The voice continued. Or perhaps I should say someone. "Mrs. Ashford is a material witness in a very sensitive case. Her husband stole certain documents before his untimely death. Documents I need returned. I'm willing to pay handsomely for them, and for the woman, of course, just to ensure her safety." I recognized that voice now. I'd heard it before, years ago, back when I still went to town, back when I still believed in things like law and justice. Judge Harlan Voss, the man who owned half of Gatlinburg and most of the people in it. "She's hurt," I called back. "Broken leg, can't travel." "How unfortunate. Perhaps I could send a doctor and some men to help transport her?" "No need. She's fine where she is." A pause. Then, "Mr. Thorne, I wonder if you understand the situation. Mrs. Ashford is wanted by her family. They've hired me to return her safely to Charleston. She's clearly not well. Grief from her husband's death has affected her judgment. The kindest thing would be to let her go home where she can be properly cared for." Behind the bed, Sarah made a small sound, not quite a sob. I glanced back and saw her shaking her head violently. "She doesn't want to go," I said. "She's not in her right mind to make that decision. Surely you can see that." "What I see is a pregnant woman who was attacked by 3 armed men. One of them was Jesse Kohler. I know Jesse works for you, Judge, which makes me wonder why your employee was trying to kill the woman you're so concerned about protecting." The silence that followed was long enough that I thought maybe they'd left. Then Voss spoke again, and all the false warmth had drained from his voice. "You're making a mistake, Thorne. A very serious mistake. Mrs. Ashford is mentally unstable. She's made wild accusations, stolen property that doesn't belong to her. Her family has every legal right to reclaim her and the child she's carrying. Then let them come through legal channels. Bring a marshal. Bring a court order. But you're not taking her tonight." "I see." Another long pause. "Tell me, Mr. Thorne, do you remember 2 years ago that unfortunate incident with your wife?" My hands tightened on the rifle. Every muscle in my body went rigid. "I remember," I said quietly. "Such a tragedy. Poor Anna. Wrong place, wrong time. The men who hurt her, they were just trying to persuade you to sell your land, weren't they? Things got out of hand. Terrible accident." "Wasn't an accident." "No?" Voss sounded almost amused. "Perhaps not. But here's what I know, Mr. Thorne. You killed 2 men that day. Shot them dead. Then you ran. You've been hiding up here ever since. And you think you can lecture me about law? Those men murdered my wife. Did they? Or did they simply make an offer you refused to hear? Did your wife perhaps get in the way of business that had nothing to do with her?" I wanted to shoot him. God help me. I wanted to put a bullet through that door and into whatever part of him was closest. But Sarah was behind me, injured and terrified, and getting into a gunfight with 4 armed men wasn't going to help her. "Leave," I said. "Now, or the next shot won't be a warning." Voss laughed, actually laughed. "You've chosen your side then? How noble, how utterly foolish. When this ends badly, Mr. Thorne, and it will end badly, remember I gave you a chance to walk away." The horses turned. Through the window, I watched them disappear back down the trail, swallowed by snow and darkness. I stood there for a long moment, listening to my own heartbeat, feeling rage and fear war inside my chest. Then I moved to where Sarah was still huddled behind the bed. "They're gone," I said. She looked up at me with eyes full of tears. "He admitted it. You heard him. He admitted his men killed your wife." "I heard. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you're involved in this now. You should have let them take me. You should have—" "Hey." I knelt down beside her. "None of that. You're safe. That's what matters." "But he'll come back. He'll send more men. He won't stop until he has those papers. Then we make sure he doesn't get them, and we get you somewhere safe." Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Where's safe? He owns the sheriff, owns the mayor. Half the county is in his pocket. Where exactly do you think we can go that he can't reach?" It was a fair question. One I didn't have a good answer for, but sitting here wasn't going to solve anything. "For now, you rest," I said. "Get your strength back. We'll figure out the next step when you're healed enough to travel." She nodded, though I could see she didn't believe it would be that simple. Neither did I. But we were both too tired to face the full weight of what was coming. I helped her back onto the bed and covered her with extra blankets. Then I moved to the far side of the cabin and settled into my chair by the fire. Sleep wasn't going to come easy tonight, not with Voss's words echoing in my head, not with the knowledge that I'd just painted a target on my back for a man who had the law in his pocket and no conscience to speak of. But I'd made my choice. For the first time in 2 years, I'd chosen to get involved, to stand up, to fight instead of hide. I looked over at Sarah, already half asleep despite everything. She'd said she was running from everyone. Now she had at least one person who wasn't running, who was standing still and saying no more. Maybe that would be enough. Or maybe we were both going to die on this mountain. Time would tell. Morning came gray and cold. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the world buried under 2 feet of fresh snow. I woke from a restless half-sleep on the floor to find Sarah already awake, watching me from the bed with an expression I couldn't quite read. "How's the leg?" I asked, standing and stretching muscles that ached from sleeping on hard wood. "Hurts, but better than yesterday." I built up the fire and started coffee, moving through the familiar routine while Sarah watched. There was something intimate about being observed doing mundane tasks. It made me aware of every movement, every sound. I hadn't had another person in this cabin since Anna died. The space suddenly felt both too small and too empty at the same time. "You kept saying a name last night," Sarah said quietly. "Anna." My hand stilled over the coffee pot. "My wife. Voss said she died 2 years ago." "She did, and you've been up here alone ever since." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Seemed like the right thing to do at the time. "Running away?" The words stung because they were true. I poured coffee into 2 tin cups and brought one to Sarah, helping her sit up enough to drink without spilling. "What would you call it?" I asked. She took a sip, made a face at the bitterness, but kept drinking. "Survival. Sometimes running is the only way to survive." "That what you're doing? Surviving?" "Trying to." I settled back into my chair with my own cup. Outside, a bird called, some kind of mountain jay, harsh and insistent. The sound echoed across the white landscape. "Tell me about the papers," I said. Sarah's hand tightened around her cup. "They're evidence of fraud, land fraud, bribery, falsified documents. My husband discovered it all." "Your husband worked for Voss?" "William was a railroad engineer. He worked for the Cumberland and Tennessee Railroad Company. Judge Voss is one of the major shareholders." She paused, gathering herself. "William was surveying routes through the mountains. He found discrepancies, places where the company claimed to own land it didn't, places where surveys had been falsified to inflate property values." "How much money are we talking about?" $300,000, maybe more. William spent months documenting everything, every forged signature, every inflated claim, every bribe paid to get false documents notarized. I let out a low whistle. $300,000 was more money than most people in these mountains would see in 10 lifetimes. Enough to kill for, enough to buy a judge, a sheriff, and anyone else who might ask inconvenient questions. "So your husband was going to report it," I said. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "He was. He had everything ready. Names, dates, amounts. He was going to Nashville to meet with the Federal Land Commission. And then there was an accident." The way she said accident made it clear she didn't believe it for a second. "What kind of accident?" "A bridge collapsed during an inspection. William was on it." Her voice cracked. "They said it was structural failure, old timbers that couldn't hold the weight. But William had inspected that bridge a week before. He told me it was solid. He said it could hold 10 times the load it was rated for. So someone made sure it failed, while William was on it." "Yes." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I was 3 months pregnant when it happened. His family, they wanted to take me back to Charleston, wanted me to marry his brother Nathaniel. Keep the baby in the family, they said. Keep the money and the name all together. You didn't want that. Nathaniel isn't kind. William warned me about him once. Said if anything ever happened, I shouldn't let them take our child." She looked down at her belly. "So I ran, took William's documents and ran. I was going to Nashville myself, going to finish what he started. But Voss found you. His men found me, 3 days out from Charleston. I thought I'd lost them in the mountains, but—" She gestured helplessly at her splinted leg. "The wagon hit ice, and then you were there." We sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled. Snow slid off the roof with a soft thump. Outside, the world was white and still and achingly beautiful. The kind of beauty that made you forget how brutal it could be. "Why did you help me?" Sarah asked suddenly. "You didn't know me. You had no reason to get involved." It was a question I'd been asking myself since yesterday. The easy answer was that I couldn't stand by and watch 3 men hurt a pregnant woman. But the truth was more complicated than that. "When I heard you scream," I said slowly, "it sounded like her, like Anna. And I thought, here's a chance to do what I couldn't do before, to actually save someone. You couldn't have saved your wife. If what Voss said is true, if his men killed her, I wasn't there." The words came out harder than I intended. "I was hunting. She was home alone. They came looking for me, wanting me to sell land I'd inherited from my father. Land that apparently had copper deposits Voss wanted. Anna told them I wasn't home. They said they'd wait. And while they waited, I stopped, unable to finish. Sarah reached out, her hand finding mine. "What happened?" "They hurt her, trying to convince her to convince me. She was 5 months pregnant. She lost the baby. And then infections set in. She died 3 days later, in that bed you're lying in now, while I held her hand and couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. Oh, Eli, I killed the 2 men who did it. Found them in town a week later, drunk and bragging about it. Shot them both dead in the street. Then I ran. Ran up here and told myself I'd never come down. Never let anyone close enough to hurt again. But you came down for me. Didn't have much choice. You needed help. You could have ignored it. Stayed hidden. Yeah, I could have." I looked at her. "But I'm tired of hiding. Tired of being a ghost. You asked why I helped you. Maybe it's because you reminded me I used to be human." Sarah squeezed my hand. We stayed like that for a long moment, 2 broken people finding unexpected comfort in shared pain. Then Sarah said, "I lied to you." "About what?" "About why I was going to Nashville. It wasn't just to report Voss. It was because—" She took a shaky breath. "I wanted to die, Eli. After William. After running from his family. I thought maybe it would be easier, for everyone, for the baby, to just not be anymore. But you didn't do it. I couldn't. Every time I thought about it, the baby would move, and I'd think, this child didn't ask to be born, didn't ask for any of this. And maybe I owe it to William to make sure our baby lives, even if I couldn't save him. So you kept running. I kept running. And then your mountain showed up." She smiled sadly. "Maybe God has a sense of humor, sends a woman who wants to die to a man living like he's already dead. Maybe we both needed to be found. Maybe." Over the next 3 days, we fell into a rhythm. I would wake before dawn to tend the fire and make coffee. Sarah would wake shortly after, and we'd eat whatever I could cook: venison jerky, johnny cakes made from cornmeal. Once, a rabbit I'd trapped near the cabin. The food was plain but filling. During the days, Sarah would sew. She'd found needle and thread in her carpet bag, and she set about repairing the tear in my buckskin jacket where a branch had caught it weeks ago. Her stitches were tiny and perfect, the work of someone who'd spent years learning the craft. While she sewed, we talked. Small things at first: the weather, the mountains, the animals I hunted. But gradually we went deeper. Sarah told me about Charleston, about growing up in a house with servants and going to a proper school where girls learned French and piano and how to pour tea for society ladies, about meeting William at a church social and falling in love with his plans to build railroads across the new territories. "He promised me adventure," she said, staring into the fire. "He kept that promise, just not the way either of us expected." I told her about my life before Anna, growing up in these mountains, learning carpentry from my father, building our cabin with my own hands, meeting Anna at a barn dance and knowing within 5 minutes that I'd marry her. She laughed at all my terrible jokes. I said, "Nobody else ever did." She said I made her feel safe. "You couldn't have known what would happen. Doesn't make it easier." On the 4th day, Sarah tried to stand. The splint held, but her leg couldn't take weight yet. I caught her before she fell, and for a moment we were very close. Close enough that I could smell the lavender soap she must have used back in Charleston. Close enough to see gold flecks in her green eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Any time." Neither of us moved. The moment stretched, fragile as spun glass. Then Sarah stepped back, wobbling on her good leg, and the spell broke. "I should rest more," she said. "Yeah, you should." That night, after Sarah had fallen asleep, I sat by the fire whittling. It was something to keep my hands busy while my mind wandered. I was carving a small wooden horse, though I couldn't have said why. My knife moved in practice strokes, peeling away thin curls of pine. Sarah's voice startled me. "You'll be a good father." I looked over. She was awake, watching me work. "I'm not going to be a father," I said. "If you were, you would be good at it." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just kept carving. "Eli, when my leg heals, when we leave here, what happens then? We get you to Nashville, to the Federal Land Commission. You give them William's evidence, and they investigate Voss. And if they don't believe me, if Voss has people there too, then we find someone who will believe you, a federal marshal, someone outside his reach." "You keep saying we." I set down the carving and looked at her directly. "You think I'm going to send you off alone after all this? It's not your fight." It became my fight the moment Voss admitted his men killed Anna. He said it was an accident, things getting out of hand. But we both know it wasn't. He wanted my land. I wouldn't sell. So he took the one thing that mattered more to me than land. Revenge won't bring her back. No, but justice might let me sleep at night. Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm scared." "Me too." "What if we can't win? What if Voss is too powerful?" I thought about that, about Judge Harlan Voss with his money and his influence, and his men who did whatever he told them to do. About how easy it would be to just stay here on my mountain, keep hiding, let the world turn without me. But then I looked at Sarah, pregnant and alone, and still fighting despite everything. And I thought about Anna, who died because I hadn't been there to protect her, who died because I thought I could ignore powerful men and they'd leave me alone. "Maybe we can't win," I said, "but we can try. And sometimes trying is all we've got." On the 7th day, someone knocked on my door. I grabbed my rifle instinctively, positioning myself between the door and Sarah. Through the window, I could see a single horse, a single rider. Not Voss, not his men. "Eli Thorne?" The voice was unfamiliar. "Don't shoot. I'm here to help." "Who are you?" "Name's Joseph Hawkins. I'm a lawyer from Nashville. I'm looking for Sarah Ashford." Sarah gasped. "Joseph, is that really you?" I looked at her. "You know him?" "William knew him. They were friends. William said if anything happened, Joseph was the only lawyer we could trust. I cracked the door open, rifle still ready. The man outside was maybe 38, tall and lean, with dark hair and eyes that suggested mixed heritage. Cherokee, maybe. He wore a good wool coat and had his hands raised to show he wasn't armed. "I'm going to need more than a name before I let you in," I said. Joseph Hawkins smiled slightly. "Fair enough. William Ashford sent me a package 3 days before he died. Documents, evidence of railroad fraud. He said if anything happened to him, I should find his wife and make sure she got safely to Nashville. I've been tracking her for 2 weeks. Trail led me here." "How'd you find this place?" "Asked around in Gatlinburg. Took some convincing, but eventually someone mentioned a mountain man named Thorne who didn't like visitors. Figured it was worth a climb." I studied him. He didn't look like one of Voss's men, didn't have that hard edge, but I'd been fooled before. "Sarah," I called over my shoulder, "this man claims to be a friend of William's. That true?" "Let him in, Eli, please." I opened the door. Joseph Hawkins stepped inside, stomping snow off his boots. When he saw Sarah on the bed, his face broke into a relieved smile. "Thank God. I was starting to think I'd never find you." "Joseph," Sarah's eyes filled with tears, "you got William's package?" "I did. Made copies too, just to be safe. Been carrying them with me ever since." He pulled a leather satchel from inside his coat. "Everything's here, ready to take to the Federal Land Commission whenever you are." Relief washed over Sarah's face, then fear replaced it. "Voss knows. He came here. He knows about the documents." Joseph's expression hardened. "Then we don't have much time. He'll be calling in favors, paying off anyone who might investigate. We need to move fast." "She can't travel yet," I said. "You broken leg. Another week at least before she can ride." "We don't have a week. Voss is already spreading word that Sarah is mentally unstable, that she kidnapped her own unborn child, that her family wants her back for her own safety. If he gets legal custody—" "He won't," I said flatly. Joseph looked at me properly for the first time. "And you are?" "The man keeping her alive." A slow smile spread across Joseph's face. "William mentioned you once. Said there was a mountain man who stood up to Voss's land grabbers. Said you killed 2 of them and disappeared. That you?" "That's me." "Good. We're going to need someone who knows how to fight." Joseph looked between us. "Here's what I'm thinking. We can't take Sarah directly to Nashville. Too obvious. Too easy for Voss to intercept. But we can take her to Gatlinburg. I have contacts there, people who'll testify against Voss if they have protection. We build a case so strong that the Federal Land Commission has to investigate." "Gatlinburg is Voss's town," I said. "Sheriff's in his pocket." "Sheriff Coleman. I know, but not everyone is. Dr. Caldwell isn't. Martha Hayes, who runs the boarding house, isn't. There are good people there, Eli. They're just scared. We give them a reason to be brave. They'll stand up." I looked at Sarah. She was listening intently, hope and fear warring on her face. "What do you think?" I asked her. "I think we don't have any better options." She touched her belly. "I think if I'm going to bring this baby into the world, I want it to be a world where men like Voss answer for their crimes." "Then we go to Gatlinburg," Joseph said. "But not yet. Give Sarah a few more days to heal. I'll head back down, start quietly reaching out to people. When you're ready, come find me. We'll do this right." "And if Voss comes back before then?" I asked. Joseph pulled a revolver from his coat and checked the cylinder. "Then I guess we give him a reception he won't forget." He stayed that night, sleeping by the fire while Sarah kept the bed and I took the floor as always. In the morning he left, riding back down the mountain with a promise to return within a week. After he was gone, Sarah said, "Do you trust him?" "Don't know him well enough to trust him. But I trust you, and you trusted William, and William trusted Joseph. That's enough for now. What about after Gatlinburg? After we expose Voss? What then?" It was a question I'd been avoiding thinking about, because thinking about it meant imagining a future beyond survival. Meant imagining Sarah somewhere safe, raising her child, building the life William had wanted for her. A life that didn't include a broken-down mountain man with blood on his hands and ghosts in his heart. Then you're free, I said. You and the baby. You can go anywhere, do anything. What about you? I'll go back to my mountain. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, What if I don't want you to? I looked at her. She was sitting up in bed, hands folded over her belly, green eyes serious. Sarah, I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other, but these past days, talking with you, being with you, I haven't felt this safe since William died. Maybe before that even. You're grieving. You're scared. Those aren't good reasons to... To what? To care about someone? To want them in my life? She shook her head. Don't tell me what I'm feeling, Eli. I know grief. I know fear. This isn't that. Then what is it? Hope. For the first time in months, I have hope. And you gave me that. I didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to explain that I was the worst possible choice for whatever she thought she was feeling. That I was damaged and dangerous and likely to get her killed just by being near her. But looking at Sarah, seeing the determination in her eyes, I couldn't bring myself to say any of that. Let's get through this first, I said finally. Get you safe. Get Voss dealt with. Then we can talk about hope. Promise? Promise. That night I lay on the floor by the fire and thought about futures I'd stopped believing in. About Sarah and her baby. About Joseph and his plan. About going down the mountain after 2 years of hiding and facing the man who'd taken everything from me. Tomorrow we'd start planning. Tomorrow we'd figure out how 2 broken people and a half-Cherokee lawyer were going to take down a judge who owned a town. But tonight, for the first time in 2 years, I let myself imagine a life beyond grief, beyond guilt, beyond the endless winter of my mountain solitude. And maybe, just maybe, I started to believe it was possible. 10 days after Joseph Hawkins rode down from my mountain, Sarah was strong enough to travel. Her leg had healed enough to bear weight with the help of a crutch I'd carved from mountain ash. The swelling in her ankle had gone down, and though she still moved slowly, there was color in her cheeks again. The baby kicked regularly now, strong enough that I could see the movements through her dress. Life insisting on itself despite everything. We left at dawn, the 3 of us. Joseph had returned 2 days earlier with supplies and news from Gatlinburg. The town was nervous, he said. Word had spread that Sarah Ashford was alive somewhere in the mountains. Voss was offering a reward for information. $500 to anyone who could tell him where the widow was hiding. That was more money than most mountain families saw in 5 years. Some people will talk, Joseph warned as we prepared to leave. Fear or greed, doesn't matter which. We have to assume Voss knows you're coming. Then why go at all? I asked. Because running only works until you run out of places to hide. We fight now, or we fight later when we're weaker. I'd rather fight now. Sarah rode with me on my horse, a big roan gelding named Red. She sat in front, her back against my chest, my arms around her to hold the reins. Joseph rode his own mount, a steady gray mare that picked her way carefully down the icy trail. We moved slowly, stopping often to rest Sarah and the horses. During one of these stops, maybe an hour into the journey, Sarah spoke quietly so only I could hear. Are you afraid? Terrified, I admitted. Me too, but not of Voss, not anymore. Then what? She turned her head to look up at me. Of what comes after? If we win. If we actually survive this, what happens then? It was the same question she'd asked before, but this time there was more weight to it, more possibility. Because in 10 days of living in close quarters, of talking through long evenings and sharing meals and watching each other exist in the small, intimate ways people do, something had shifted between us. Something neither of us had named, but both of us felt. One thing at a time, I said, but my hand found hers and squeezed gently. She squeezed back. One thing at a time. We reached Gatlinburg as the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple behind the mountains. The town looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe I'd grown used to the vastness of the high country. Or maybe 2 years away had changed my sense of scale. Buildings that had seemed substantial now looked fragile. Streets I'd thought wide felt narrow. The whole place had the temporary quality of something built fast and maintained poorly. People stopped what they were doing to stare as we rode down Main Street. I saw recognition flicker across faces, heard my name whispered. Elijah Thorne, the murderer, the mountain ghost, back from the dead. Ignore them, Joseph said quietly. Let them talk. Talk is just noise. He led us to a building near the edge of town, a 2-story structure with a sign that read, Hayes Boarding House. The paint was peeling and one of the shutters hung crooked, but smoke rose from the chimney and light glowed in the windows. It looked warm. It looked safe. A woman appeared on the porch before we could dismount. She was maybe 58, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, and hands that looked like they'd done hard work for a long time. Her eyes were sharp as she took us in, lingering on Sarah's pregnant belly and my rifle. "Joseph Hawkins," she said. "You bring trouble to my door?" "Only the kind that needs shelter, Martha. Trouble's still trouble." But she was already moving down the steps, reaching up to help Sarah dismount. "Lord have mercy, child, you look half frozen. Come inside before you catch your death." Martha Hayes ushered us into the boarding house with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd spent decades managing chaos. The interior was neat and plain. Worn furniture that had been well cared for, a fire burning in the main room, the smell of something cooking, maybe stew or soup. "You'll be wanting rooms," Martha said. It wasn't a question. "I've got 2 available, one for the lady, one for you men to share." "That's fine," Joseph said. Martha looked at me. "Eli Thorne. Heard you were dead, or wished you were." Neither one stuck. Apparently not. She studied me with those sharp eyes. "You planning to bring more trouble than you're worth?" "Planning not to bring any, but can't promise it won't find us anyway. Honest, at least. I'll take that." She turned to Sarah. "What's your name, child?" "Sarah. Sarah Ashford. The widow everyone's talking about." "The one Judge Voss says is touched in the head." Sarah lifted her chin. "I'm not touched. I'm angry. There's a difference." Martha smiled, just a little. "Good. Angry women get things done. Come on, I'll show you to your room. You look like you need to lie down before you fall down." While Martha took Sarah upstairs, Joseph and I settled the horses in the small stable behind the boarding house. We worked in silence for a while, rubbing down the animals and making sure they had feed and water. The physical work felt good after hours in the saddle. "Martha's trustworthy?" I asked finally. "As trustworthy as anyone in this town. She's got no love for Voss. He tried to buy her property 3 years back. When she wouldn't sell, suddenly the town board decided her building didn't meet safety standards, threatened to condemn it unless she made expensive repairs. She made the repairs, but she didn't forget. So she'll help us. She'll help Sarah. You and me, we're just baggage that comes with." "Fair enough." Joseph leaned against a stall door, studying me. "Can I ask you something?" "Can't stop you." "What are you to her? Sarah, I mean. Are you just helping because Voss killed your wife, or is there something else?" It was a direct question, and I found I didn't have a simple answer. "Started as the first thing. Don't know what it is now." "She looks at you like you hung the moon. She's grateful, that's all." "Is it?" Joseph shook his head. "I knew William Ashford. Good man, smart. Sarah loved him something fierce, but the way she looks at you, it's different. Like your heir, and she's been drowning. She's grieving. She's scared. People in those states see things that aren't there. Maybe, or maybe you're the one not seeing what is there." He pushed off the stall and headed toward the door. "Just think about it, Eli. Because if this goes the way I hope, Sarah's going to need someone when it's over, someone who can help her build a life. Could be you, if you let it." He left me alone with the horses and my thoughts. That night, Martha fed us stew and cornbread at her kitchen table. It was the first real meal I'd had in days that I hadn't cooked myself, and I ate like a starving man. Sarah picked at her food, too nervous to have much appetite. Joseph ate steadily while updating us on what he'd learned. "I've talked to 8 families," he said quietly. "All of them have been cheated by Voss one way or another. Forged documents, Fake surveys. Land seized for railroad development that never happened. They've got stories, and some have proof, not as much as Williams' documents, but enough to establish a pattern. Will they testify? Sarah asked. 5 said yes. 3 are too scared, but 5 is better than nothing. What about the law? I asked. Sheriff Coleman works for Voss. Who do we report this to? Federal Marshal out of Nashville. Name's Benjamin Hale. I sent him a letter last week outlining the case. He sent word back that he's investigating but needs more than accusations. He needs witnesses willing to go on record, needs documentation. He's asking us to bring everything to him. So we go to Nashville, Sarah said, eventually. But first, we need to gather everyone together, get statements, make copies of everything. Build a case so solid that even Voss's lawyers can't make it disappear. Martha spoke up from where she was washing dishes. You do that here, in Gatlinburg. You're painting targets on everyone's backs. Voss finds out, he'll come down hard. I know, Joseph said. That's why we need to move fast. Get everything ready, then leave town before he can organize a response. How long? I asked. 3 days. Maybe 4 if we're lucky. 3 days didn't seem like enough time, but it would have to be. The next morning, I woke before dawn to find Joseph already gone. Martha said he'd left early to start gathering the families, setting up meetings in quiet places where they wouldn't be noticed. That left me and Sarah alone in the boarding house. Sarah was sitting in the main room when I came downstairs, staring out the window at the street. She looked tired. The journey yesterday had taken more out of her than she'd admitted. Should be resting, I said. Can't sleep. Too much on my mind. I poured coffee from the pot Martha had left on the stove and brought Sarah a cup. She took it gratefully, wrapping both hands around the warmth. Tell me about Gatlinburg, she said. Before, when you lived here. Not much to tell. Had a house on the north edge of town. Did carpentry work. Built furniture mostly. Some houses. Anna kept a small garden. We had friends. Went to church on Sundays. It was simple. Sounds nice. It was. I sat down across from her until it wasn't. Do you ever think about coming back after all this is over? Don't know. Town looks at me different now, like I'm something dangerous they're not sure about. You are dangerous, Sarah said quietly, but not in the way they think. What's that mean? She met my eyes. You're dangerous to people who think they can get away with hurting others, to people like Voss who believe power means you can do whatever you want. That kind of dangerous, the world needs more of. Before I could respond, the door burst open. A boy, maybe 12 years old, ran in breathing hard. Mr. Hawkins sent me, he gasped. Says you need to come quick. There's trouble at Doc Caldwell's place. Doc Caldwell's office was a small building tucked between the general store and the church. When we got there, a crowd had gathered outside. Angry voices carried through the cold morning air. I pushed through to find Joseph standing on the porch facing down 4 men on horses. One of them was Sheriff Coleman, big man, running to fat, with a face that looked like old leather and eyes that showed nothing. The other 3 were deputies, or what passed for deputies in a town owned by one man. This is official business, Hawkins, Coleman was saying. You need to step aside. What business is that, Sheriff? Got a complaint that Doc Caldwell's been spreading lies about Judge Voss. False accusations of fraud and corruption. That's slander. I'm here to bring him in for questioning. Doc Caldwell appeared in the doorway behind Joseph. He was a thin man, maybe 55, with gray hair and steady hands. Hands that had delivered half the babies in Gatlinburg and set more bones than he could count. He looked calm, but I could see tension in his shoulders. I haven't slandered anyone, Sheriff. I've simply told the truth about what I've witnessed. Truth according to who? You? A man who's been losing patience because people don't trust you anymore? I've been losing patience because Voss has been telling people not to come to me, because I won't lie for him. Coleman smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. That's exactly the kind of statement I'm talking about. Making claims you can't prove. That's slander, Doc, and I'm going to have to insist you come with me. He's not going anywhere, Joseph said firmly. You interfering with the law, Hawkins? I'm preventing an unlawful arrest. You have no warrant, no actual charge, just Voss's word that he's been slandered. That's not how law works, Sheriff, even out here. Coleman's hand dropped to the gun at his hip. The deputies did the same. The crowd went very quiet. Last chance, Hawkins. Step aside. That's when I stepped forward, rifle in hand. I didn't point it at anyone, just held it casual across my chest. But everyone knew what it meant. Eli Thorne, Coleman said slowly. Should have known you'd be mixed up in this. Doc's not going anywhere, I said quietly. You threatening a peace officer? Just stating facts. Doc stays. You and your boys ride out. Everyone goes home peaceful. There's 4 of us and 2 of you. Don't need but 1 bullet to start a fight none of us walk away from. Question is whether you're willing to die for whatever Voss is paying you. Coleman's face flushed red. For a moment I thought he might actually draw, but then a voice cut through the tension. Sheriff Coleman, what seems to be the problem? Judge Harlan Voss rode up on a black horse, tall and imposing in his long coat. He looked every inch the distinguished judge. Silver hair perfectly combed, expression concerned and reasonable. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was exactly what a judge should be. These men are interfering with an arrest, Judge, Coleman said. I see. Voss turned his attention to me, and I saw recognition in his eyes. And something else. Calculation. Mr. Thorne, you've come down from your mountain. How unexpected. Got business in town. Business with Mrs. Ashford, I assume? Is she here? I have some matters to discuss with her. Legal matters concerning her late husband's estate. She's resting, I said. I've been through a hard time. Not up for visitors. Of course, I understand completely. Voss's tone was sympathetic, but his eyes were cold. However, her family in Charleston is quite worried. They've asked me to ensure she receives proper care. A pregnant woman traveling alone in these mountains. It's not safe. Surely you can see that. She's not alone, I said. No, she has you, and Mr. Hawkins, and apparently Doc Caldwell. Quite the collection of protectors. He smiled slightly. Tell me, Mr. Thorne, what exactly is your interest in Mrs. Ashford? She's a respectable widow. You're a man wanted for murder. Doesn't seem like an appropriate association. Charges against Eli were never proven, Joseph said quickly, and the men he's accused of killing were themselves accused of killing his wife. Any court would call that justified. Would they, I wonder, but that's not really the issue here, is it? Voss looked at Doc Caldwell. The issue is that certain people in this town have been making accusations, serious accusations, against me and my business associates. Accusations that could damage reputations and harm legitimate enterprises. Legitimate? Doc laughed bitterly. You call stealing land legitimate? I call following the law legitimate. Every property I own was acquired through legal means. Proper documentation. Fair prices. If people failed to read what they signed, that's hardly my fault. The documents were forged, Joseph said. We have proof. Voss's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Proof. Yes, I've heard about this supposed proof. Documents that William Ashford allegedly compiled before his tragic death. Documents that his widow conveniently claims to have. Tell me, Mr. Hawkins, have you actually seen these documents? I have, and I've made copies, sent them to the Federal Land Commission in Nashville. For the first time, Voss looked genuinely surprised. It was just a flicker, gone almost immediately, but I saw it, and so did everyone else in that crowd. That's a serious claim, Voss said slowly. It's a true claim. Marshal Benjamin Hale is reviewing everything as we speak. He'll be here within the week to conduct a formal investigation. Voss was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was harder. I see. Well then, if a federal investigation is coming, I suppose we'll all have to cooperate fully. In the meantime, I trust Mrs. Ashford will make herself available for questioning. The marshal will certainly want to speak with her. She'll cooperate with any legitimate investigation, Joseph said. Good, because if she doesn't, if she tries to leave town before the marshal arrives, I'll have no choice but to assume she's fleeing prosecution. Sheriff Coleman, I want you to make sure Mrs. Ashford doesn't leave Gatlinburg until this is resolved. For her own protection, of course. That's unlawful detention, Joseph protested. That's protective custody. Given her delicate condition and recent erratic behavior, I think any reasonable person would agree she needs supervision. Voss turned his horse. Good day, gentlemen. I look forward to clearing up this unfortunate misunderstanding. He rode away, the sheriff and deputies following. But the damage was done. Sarah was effectively trapped in Gatlinburg. If she tried to leave, Coleman would arrest her, and if she stayed, Voss had a week to figure out how to discredit her before the marshal arrived. The crowd dispersed slowly, people casting nervous glances our way. Doc Caldwell let out a long breath. That went poorly, he said. Could have gone worse, Joseph replied. At least now everyone knows a federal marshal is coming. Voss can't make people disappear if everyone's watching. Can't he? Doc shook his head. You don't know him like I do. He's got a week. That's more than enough time for him to arrange accidents. Then we make sure no accidents happen, I said. We walked back to the boarding house in silence. Sarah was waiting on the porch, her face pale. I heard, she said. People were talking in the street. Voss knows about the marshal. He knows Joseph sent the documents. We knew he'd find out eventually, Joseph said. Better now than later. Is it? Now he knows exactly what we're doing. He can plan. He can counter everything. Or he can panic and make mistakes. Joseph put a hand on her shoulder. Sarah, we're not backing down. Not now. We're too close. That night, Martha's boarding house felt like a fortress under siege. Joseph organized watch rotations. He and I would take turns staying awake, keeping an eye on the street. Doc Caldwell offered to help, and so did Martha herself. For the first time since coming down from my mountain, I felt like I was part of something, part of a community standing together against someone who'd taken too much for too long. Sarah couldn't sleep. I found her in the main room around midnight, sitting by the fire with one hand on her belly. Baby kicking? I asked quietly. Constantly. Like she knows something's wrong. She? Sarah smiled slightly. I think it's a girl. Don't know why. Just a feeling. I sat down beside her. Outside, snow had started falling again, soft and silent. I keep thinking about William, Sarah said after a while, about what he'd say if he could see all this, all these people putting themselves at risk because of his documents. He'd probably be proud of you, fighting when it would be easier to run. Would he? She looked at me. Or would he tell me to stop, to think about the baby, to just let it go and be safe? Don't know? Didn't know him. But I know you, and I know you're not the kind of person who can let injustice stand, even when it costs. Is that a good thing or a stupid thing? Sometimes they're the same thing. She laughed softly. Then her expression turned serious. Eli, if something happens to me, if this goes wrong and I don't make it, will you promise me something? Don't talk like that. Please, just promise me. If I die, you'll make sure my baby is safe. Find someone good to raise her, someone kind. Will you do that? I wanted to say no, wanted to tell her nothing was going to happen, but looking at her face, seeing the genuine fear there, I couldn't dismiss her worry. I promise, I said, but you're going to be fine. We both are. How do you know? Because I'm not losing anyone else I care about. Not to Voss, not to anyone. The words hung in the air between us. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. You care about me? Yeah, I do. Even though we barely know each other? Even though I'm pregnant with another man's child? Even though being near me might get you killed? Even though all that? She reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were cold, and I wrapped both my hands around hers to warm them. I care about you too, she whispered. More than I probably should. More than makes sense. Doesn't have to make sense. What happens after? If we survive this? It was the third time she'd asked that question, but this time I had an answer. Then we figure it out together, one day at a time. No promises beyond that, just seeing where it goes. I'd like that. We sat there in the firelight, holding hands, while snow fell outside and the town slept around us. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new dangers, but for right now, In this moment, we had something that felt almost like peace, and that was enough. The trouble started on the third day. Joseph had been working steadily, meeting with families in secret, collecting testimonies, making copies of everything. We had statements from 7 families now, 7 stories of forged documents and stolen land, 7 pieces of a puzzle that painted Judge Harlan Voss as exactly what he was, a thief in respectable clothes. But on the morning of the third day, one of those families changed their minds. The Johnsons lived on the south edge of town, a small farm that Voss had been trying to acquire for 2 years. Joseph had spent hours with them, going over their story, documenting everything. They'd been solid, ready to testify. Then their barn burned down. It happened just before dawn. By the time anyone noticed, the whole structure was engulfed. The Johnsons lost 3 horses, a milk cow, and most of their winter hay. Sheriff Coleman showed up to investigate and declared it an accident. Faulty lantern, he said. These things happen, but everyone knew it wasn't an accident. By noon, the Johnsons had withdrawn their testimony. They wouldn't even talk to Joseph, just shut their door and pulled their curtains closed. That's intimidation, Joseph said angrily when he returned to the boarding house. Plain and simple. Voss is sending a message. Talk to us and burn. Will the others hold? I asked. I don't know. Maybe. If they don't have anything left to lose. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. We need that marshal here now, before Voss can do any more damage. But Marshal Hale wasn't due for another 4 days. 4 days felt like an eternity. That afternoon, I went with Sarah to visit Doc Caldwell. Her leg was healing well, but Doc wanted to check on the baby, make sure all the stress and travel hadn't caused problems. While he examined her in the back room, I waited up front, looking through the window at the street. Gatlinburg looked normal, people going about their business, children playing in the snow. But there was a tension underneath. You could see it in the way folks glanced over their shoulders, in how conversations died when strangers approached. The town was waiting for something to break. Doc came out shaking his head. Baby's fine. Strong heartbeat. Good position. But Sarah needs rest. Real rest. Not running around worrying about marshals and testimony. She won't rest until this is done. I know. Stubborn as they come, that one. He looked at me seriously. You planning to stick around after, when the dust settles? Haven't thought that far ahead. Bull. You've thought about it. Question is whether you're brave enough to admit it. What's that supposed to mean? Means I see how you look at her, and how she looks at you. Means I think maybe you've found something worth coming down from that mountain for. But you're too scared of being hurt again to say it out loud. I didn't have an answer for that. That night, Sarah found me on the boarding house porch. I was keeping watch, rifle across my knees, scanning the dark street for trouble. Can't sleep? She asked, settling into the chair beside mine. Too wired. Me too. Baby's restless. She rubbed her belly absently. Eli, I've been thinking about what happens if the marshal doesn't believe us. If Voss has already bought him off. Joseph says Marshal Hale is honest. Joseph says a lot of things. But he doesn't know for sure. Nobody does until the man actually gets here. She was right, of course. We were betting everything on the honor of a man none of us had met. It was a fragile plan built on hope and not much else. If it doesn't work, I said slowly, we run. Take you somewhere Voss can't reach, maybe up north, Montana Territory or beyond. Run forever? That's no life. It's better than being dead. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, when I was younger, maybe 15, I read this book about mountain climbers, men who climbed peaks in the Rockies and the Sierra Nevada. I remember being fascinated by them, by people who would risk everything just to stand on top of something tall. Why? That's what I wondered, so I asked my father. He said some people climb mountains to prove they can, others climb to get away from something, and a few climb because they're looking for something they lost. Which kind are you? She looked at me. I think I was running away, but then I found you. And now I don't want to run anymore. I want to stand still. I want to fight. Fighting's dangerous. So is climbing. Doesn't mean you don't do it. Before I could respond, I saw movement at the end of the street. 3 figures on horses, moving slow through the darkness. They stopped in front of the boarding house, just at the edge of the lamplight. "Thorne," a voice called out. "Jesse Kohler. Got a message from the judge. Says he wants to talk. No trouble, just talk. Tell him to come during daylight like civilized folk. Says it's urgent. Says it concerns Mrs. Ashford and her future. Her future's none of his concern. Judge seems to think different. Says he has information about the marshal, about his investigation. Says Mrs. Ashford might want to hear it before she makes any more mistakes." I stood up, rifle ready. "Rifle. What kind of information?" "The kind that needs to be delivered private. Just you and the judge. Nobody else." It was obviously a trap, but it was a trap baited with something I couldn't ignore. If Voss really did have information about Marshal Hale, about whether the investigation was legitimate, we needed to know. "Where and when?" I asked. "His office. 1 hour. Come alone or don't come at all." They rode away before I could answer. Sarah grabbed my arm. "You're not seriously considering this. Might be the only way to find out what he knows, or it might be a way to get you killed. Maybe, but if he wanted me dead, he could have burned this place down already. He wants something, and until I know what, we're fighting blind." Joseph appeared in the doorway, having heard the whole exchange. "She's right, Eli, this smells wrong. Everything about this situation smells wrong, but sitting here waiting doesn't change anything. At least this way, we learn something. Or you walk into a room and don't walk out," Sarah said, her voice tight with fear. I took her hand. "I'll be careful, I promise." 1 hour later, I stood outside Judge Voss's office. It was in a building near the courthouse, all dark wood and polished brass. Light spilled from the windows onto the snowy street. Through the glass, I could see Voss sitting behind a massive desk, reading papers like he didn't have a care in the world. I checked my rifle one more time, then pushed through the door. The office was exactly what you'd expect. Law books lining the walls. A grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Oil paintings of stern-faced men who probably thought they were important. Voss looked up as I entered and smiled. "Mr. Thorne, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." "I'll stand." "As you prefer." He set aside his papers and folded his hands on the desk. "Can I offer you a drink? I have excellent whiskey." "Just talk. You said you had information about Marshal Hale." "Straight to business. I admire that." Voss leaned back in his chair. "Yes, the Marshal, Benjamin Hale, decorated veteran, 15 years with the Federal Marshal Service, reputation for honesty and thoroughness. By all accounts, exactly the kind of man you'd want investigating a case like this. So what's the problem?" "The problem is that Marshal Hale is also a practical man. A man who understands that not every situation is black and white, that sometimes the law needs to be interpreted with flexibility. You're saying he's corrupt. I'm saying he's reasonable, and I've had the opportunity to explain to him the full context of this situation, including Mrs. Ashford's mental state, her history of instability following her husband's death, the concerns her family has about her welfare. That's all lies and you know it." "Is it? Can you prove she's mentally sound? Can you prove she hasn't fabricated these accusations out of grief and confusion? Because I can bring in doctors who will testify otherwise. I can produce witnesses who will say she's been behaving erratically. I can paint a very convincing picture of a woman who needs help, not encouragement in her delusions." I felt rage building in my chest, hot and sharp. "What do you want, Voss?" "I want this to end peacefully, for everyone's sake." He opened a drawer and pulled out a document. "I'm prepared to offer Mrs. Ashford $20,000, payment for her late husband's land holdings and compensation for any distress this situation has caused. In exchange, she signs this agreement stating that all her previous accusations were made in error, that she was mistaken about what she thought she saw in her husband's papers." "She'll never sign that." "Won't she? 20,000 is enough to set her up comfortably anywhere she wants to go, enough to raise her child without worry. All she has to do is admit she was wrong. He paused. The alternative is that Marshal Hale arrives, conducts his investigation, and concludes that Mrs. Ashford is not a credible witness, that her accusations are baseless, and then her family will have grounds to take custody of her child, claim she's unfit to be a mother. You son of a bitch. I'm a realist, Mr. Thorne. I'm offering her a way out, a way to walk away with money and freedom and her child. That's more generous than most people in her position ever get. I wanted to shoot him, right there in his fancy office with his law books and his expensive whiskey. It would be so easy. One pull of the trigger, and this would all be over. But it wouldn't be over. Killing Voss would just make me the murderer he already claimed I was, would give him the win, even in death. I'll tell her about your offer, I said slowly, but I already know her answer. Do you? Then you don't know her as well as you think. I turned to leave. One more thing, Mr. Thorne. Voss's voice stopped me at the door. Your wife, Anna. Her death was unfortunate, but it was also avoidable. If you'd simply sold me that land when I asked, none of it would have happened. Remember that. Remember that your stubbornness killed her. I stood there with my hand on the door, fighting every instinct that screamed at me to turn around and end him. You're wrong, I said quietly. My stubbornness didn't kill Anna. Your greed did, and before this is over, you're going to pay for it. I walked out before he could respond. The cold night air hit me like a slap, clearing some of the rage from my head. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from the effort of not doing what every part of me wanted to do. When I got back to the boarding house, Sarah was waiting up. She took one look at my face and knew. What did he say? I told her everything, the offer, the threat, the claim that Marshal Hale was already compromised. When I finished, Sarah was quiet for a long time. $20,000, she finally said. That's more money than I've ever seen. It's also blood money. I know, but it's enough to disappear, to go somewhere he'd never find us, to raise my baby safe. The word us hit me harder than it should have. Not me and my baby, us. Is that what you want? I asked. No, but I'm scared, Eli. Scared of losing. Scared of them taking my baby. Scared of you getting killed trying to protect me. I moved to sit beside her, taking her hands in mine. Then we make sure none of that happens. We wait for the marshal. We present our evidence. We let the law work the way it's supposed to. And if Voss was telling the truth, if the marshal is already in his pocket, then we find another marshal, another judge. We keep fighting until we find someone who isn't corrupt. It might take time, might take going all the way to Washington, but we don't give up. Tears slid down Sarah's cheeks. Why are you doing this? Really? Is it just because of Anna? Or is there something else? I thought about that. About why I was here instead of on my mountain. About why the thought of Sarah being hurt made my chest tight. About why the word us from her lips felt like coming home. It started because of Anna, I admitted. But it's not about that anymore. It's about you. About not wanting to watch another person I care about get destroyed by someone like Voss. About maybe finding a reason to be more than just a ghost hiding in the mountains. You care about me. Yeah, I do. More than makes sense. More than is probably smart. She leaned her head against my shoulder. Thank God. Because I care about you too. And I was starting to think I was imagining it. We sat like that for a while, just being close, finding comfort in each other's presence. Outside, Gatlinburg slept. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The marshal would arrive soon, and we'd find out whether justice was real or just another pretty lie that powerful men told. But tonight, we had this moment, and sometimes moments were all you got. Marshal Benjamin Hale arrived on the fourth day, riding into Gatlinburg with 2 deputies and an air of grim determination. He was a man in his early 50s, weathered by years of frontier justice, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He wore his badge openly and carried himself like someone who'd seen every kind of human ugliness and stopped being surprised by it. Joseph met him at the edge of town and brought him straight to the boarding house. Sarah and I were waiting in Martha's parlor when they arrived. The marshal looked us over with that calculating gaze, taking in Sarah's pregnant belly, my rifle, the tension in the room. "Mrs. Ashford," he said, removing his hat, "I'm Marshal Benjamin Hale. Mr. Hawkins has briefed me on your situation. I'd like to hear your story directly, if you're willing." Sarah straightened in her chair. "I'm willing, Marshal, but first I need to know something. Has Judge Voss spoken to you?" Hale's expression didn't change. "He has. Made quite a case for your mental instability. Said you've been making wild accusations born of grief. Said your family is concerned for your welfare. And do you believe him?" "I believe in evidence, Mrs. Ashford. Not stories, not reputations, evidence. So why don't you show me what you have, and I'll decide for myself." Joseph pulled out the documents. William Ashford's meticulous records, forged land deeds, survey maps that didn't match official records, lists of bribes paid, names and dates and amounts. It took 2 hours to go through everything, with Sarah explaining each piece, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Marshal Hale listened without interrupting, took notes, asked pointed questions. When Sarah finished, he sat back and was quiet for a long moment. "This is substantial," he said finally, "if it's genuine." "You think I forged my dead husband's handwriting?" Sarah's voice was sharp with anger. "I think stranger things have happened. I also think Judge Voss has access to excellent lawyers who will claim exactly that." He held up a hand before Sarah could protest. "But I also think the pattern here is too consistent to be fabricated, too detailed. I've seen enough fraud cases to know what real evidence looks like, and this looks real." Relief flooded Sarah's face. "So you'll investigate?" "I already am. Sent wires to Nashville yesterday requesting official land records for comparison. Should arrive tomorrow or the day after. I'll also need to interview the families Mr. Hawkins mentioned, the ones who claim Voss defrauded them. Some of them are scared," Joseph said, "after what happened to the Johnsons." "What happened to the Johnsons?" "Their barn burned down the day after they agreed to testify. Sheriff Coleman called it an accident." Hale's jaw tightened. "I see. Well, Coleman works for the county. I work for the federal government. Let me make something clear to everyone in this room. Witness intimidation is a federal crime. If anyone tries to harm or threaten these witnesses while I'm conducting this investigation, they'll answer to me personally. And I don't answer to local judges or sheriffs." It was the first real hope we'd had in days, but that hope died before sunset. Doc Caldwell came running to the boarding house just as the light was fading. His face was pale, his hands shaking. "It's Sarah," he gasped. "They're saying she set that fire, the Johnson barn. They're saying she did it to intimidate them into not testifying." "That's insane," I said. "She was here with us the whole time." "I know that, you know that. But Jesse Kohler just swore out a statement saying he saw her near the Johnson farm that night. Said she was carrying a lantern and acting suspicious." "Jesse Kohler is a liar working for Voss," Joseph said. "Doesn't matter. Sheriff Coleman has a warrant. He's on his way here now to arrest her." Sarah stood up, one hand pressed to her belly. "Let him come. I'll answer his questions. I have nothing to hide." "Sarah, no." I moved to stand beside her. "The moment you're in that jail, you're in Voss's power. He can arrange anything. Say you tried to escape. Say you attacked a deputy. Say whatever he wants. Then what do I do? Run? I can't run, Eli. I'm 7 months pregnant with a broken leg that's barely healed." Marshal Hale spoke up. "There might be another way. Mrs. Ashford, would you be willing to place yourself in federal protective custody? Under my authority, not the local sheriff's? Can you do that?" "I can if I deem you a material witness in a federal investigation, which I do. Coleman wants you for arson, which is county jurisdiction. But you're my witness in a fraud case that crosses state lines. Federal law supersedes local law." "Will that actually stop them?" Sarah asked. "It'll stop them legally. Whether Coleman respects that is another question." As if summoned by his name, we heard horses outside. Through the window, I could see Sheriff Coleman and 4 deputies dismounting in front of the boarding house. All of them were armed. Marshal Hale stood and adjusted his badge. "Everyone stay here. Let me handle this." He walked out onto the porch. Joseph, Sarah, and I crowded near the window to watch. Coleman was climbing the steps, a piece of paper in his hand. "Marshal," he said with false courtesy. "Didn't know you were staying here. I've got county business. Need to speak with Sarah Ashford." "Regarding what, Sheriff?" "Arson. Got a witness places her at the Johnson farm the night their barn burned. Need to bring her in for questioning. Mrs. Ashford is currently under federal protective custody. She's a material witness in my investigation. You'll need to go through federal channels to question her." Coleman's face darkened. "Now, Marshal, I don't think you understand how things work around here. This is county business. You got no jurisdiction." "Actually, Sheriff, I have jurisdiction anywhere a federal crime has been committed, and witness intimidation in a federal investigation is definitely a federal crime. Nobody's intimidating anybody. I'm just doing my job." "Then do it properly. File a request through the federal prosecutor's office. If they determine your case has merit, I'll make Mrs. Ashford available for questioning, in the presence of her lawyer, with me present." Coleman's hand dropped to his gun. "You're interfering with an arrest, Marshal. I'm protecting a federal witness. There's a difference." The tension ratcheted up another notch. Coleman's deputies shifted nervously. This was the moment where it could all explode into violence. Then a new voice cut through the standoff. "Sheriff Coleman, stand down." Judge Voss rode up on his black horse, looking calm and collected as always. "Marshal Hale is correct. Federal authority supersedes local in matters of interstate commerce fraud. You'll need to file proper paperwork." Coleman looked confused. "But Judge, you said—" "I said to investigate the arson allegation, which you've done. The witness statement has been recorded. That's sufficient for now." Voss turned to Hale. "Marshal, I appreciate your diligence in this matter. However, I hope you understand that Mrs. Ashford's freedom of movement must be somewhat restricted, given the serious nature of the accusations against her." "She's not going anywhere," Hale said. "She's agreed to remain available for questioning." "Excellent. Then we're all in agreement." Voss smiled that cold smile. "I look forward to seeing how your investigation proceeds, Marshal. I'm confident the truth will prevail." He rode away, Coleman and the deputies following reluctantly. When they were gone, Hale came back inside. His face was grim. "That was too easy," he said. "Voss gave up without a fight. That means he has something else planned." "Like what?" Sarah asked. "I don't know yet, but we need to be ready for it." That night we organized watches again. Joseph and I traded off, keeping guard while Martha and Doc Caldwell stayed nearby. Marshal Hale set up in the room next to Sarah's, his door open, his gun on the nightstand. Around midnight, Sarah went into labor. It started with a small gasp. I was sitting outside her door half dozing when I heard it. Then a louder cry. I burst into the room to find her doubled over, hands pressed to her belly. "Something's wrong," she gasped. "The baby. It's too early." I ran for Doc Caldwell. He came quickly, took one look at Sarah, and his face went pale. "She's in labor, early labor. The stress, the fear, it's triggered it." He turned to Martha. "I need hot water, clean towels, and every sheet you've got." "How early?" I asked. 6 weeks, maybe 7. The baby might survive if we're lucky, but it's going to be touch and go." Sarah screamed then, a sound of pure agony that cut right through me. Doc gave her something to bite down on, a leather strap, and began examining her. "The baby's coming whether we're ready or not," he said. "Someone needs to hold her hand, keep her calm." I moved to Sarah's side without thinking. She grabbed my hand so hard I thought bones might break. Her face was slick with sweat, eyes wide with terror. "I can't do this," she gasped. "I can't. It's too soon." "Yes, you can," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're the strongest person I know. You can do this." Another contraction hit. Sarah screamed through gritted teeth, her whole body rigid with pain. Martha wiped her forehead with a cool cloth. Doc worked quickly, speaking in low, urgent tones about dilation and positioning and things I didn't understand. Time became strange. It might have been an hour, might have been 3. All I knew was Sarah's hand in mine and her screams echoing through the boarding house and my own helpless terror as I watched her suffer. And then Doc said, "One more push, Sarah. One more, and we'll have the baby." Sarah gathered herself, every ounce of strength she had left, and pushed. The baby came in a rush of blood and fluid. Doc cut the cord quickly, wrapped the infant in a clean towel. For a terrible moment, there was silence. Then a thin, wailing cry filled the room. "It's a girl," Doc said, his voice thick with relief. "Small, but breathing. She's a fighter." He placed the baby on Sarah's chest. Sarah's arms came up automatically, cradling her daughter against her skin. The infant was red and wrinkled, no bigger than my two hands together, with eyes squeezed shut and fists waving weakly. Fragile as a bird, beautiful beyond words. "Grace," Sarah whispered through her tears. "Her name is Grace, and the most beautiful." Doc worked to deliver the afterbirth and make sure Sarah wasn't bleeding too badly. Once he was satisfied both mother and child were stable, he stepped back and let out a long breath. "That was closer than I'd like," he said. "Baby's lungs are underdeveloped. Next 24 hours are critical. She needs to stay warm, needs to feed regularly. If she makes it through tomorrow, her chances improve significantly." "And Sarah?" I asked, exhausted but strong. "She needs rest and fluids, no stress, no excitement." He looked at me meaningfully. "Whatever's happening with Voss and the marshal, it needs to wait. Sarah can't handle any more strain right now." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Martha cleaned up while Doc examined Grace more carefully. The baby was too weak to nurse properly, so Doc showed Sarah how to hand express milk and feed her with a small spoon. It was slow and painstaking work. I stood by the window watching dawn break over Gatlinburg, listening to Grace's thin cries behind me. Something had shifted in my chest. Some wall I'd built around my heart had cracked wide open. This child, this fragile, fighting little life. She wasn't mine by blood. But standing there, knowing Sarah had nearly died bringing her into the world, knowing what she represented for both of us, I felt a fierce protectiveness I'd never experienced before. I would keep them safe, both of them, whatever it took. Marshal Hale appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. He took in the scene quietly. "Everything all right?" "Baby came early," I said. "Girl, small but alive." "Congratulations are in order then." He paused. "Though the timing's not ideal." "Why?" "Because Coleman just arrested 3 of our witnesses. Claims they were involved in the arson conspiracy. Says they were working with Mrs. Ashford to intimidate the Johnsons." I felt rage boil up. "That's a lie." "Of course it's a lie, but it's effective. Now half our witnesses are too scared to talk and the other half are sitting in Coleman's jail. And with Mrs. Ashford unable to travel or testify for at least a few days. Voss is buying time." "Exactly. And using it to dismantle our case piece by piece." I looked back at Sarah, exhausted and pale, holding Grace against her chest, looked at that tiny baby fighting for every breath. And something hardened in me. "No," I said quietly. "He's not getting away with this. Eli, there's nothing we can do right now. We need to wait for the official records from Nashville, build our case properly." "How long will that take? 2 days? Maybe 3? "We don't have 3 days. Voss is going to keep picking off witnesses, keep building his counter-narrative. By the time your records arrive, there won't be anyone left willing to testify." "So what do you suggest?" I thought about it. About Voss sitting in his office, confident in his power. About all the people he'd hurt over the years. About Anna dying because I hadn't been there. About Sarah nearly dying in childbirth because of the stress he'd caused. "I'm going to end this," I said. "Tonight." "Eli, no. If you go after Voss now, you'll just prove everything he said about you. That you're dangerous, unstable, a murderer." "I'm not going to kill him. I'm going to make him confess." Hale stared at me. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" "By giving him what he wants. Me." The plan was simple. Maybe too simple. But sometimes simple was all you had. I would go to Voss's office that night, tell him I wanted to make a deal. That Sarah was too weak to fight anymore, that the baby's early birth had changed everything, that I was willing to convince her to take his money and sign his agreement if he'd drop all charges and leave us alone. Voss would never believe I'd give up that easily. But his ego would make him think he could manipulate me, get me to admit something incriminating, maybe even get me to attack him, giving Coleman justification to shoot me on sight. What Voss wouldn't know was that Marshal Hale would be listening outside the window, that Joseph would be positioned across the street with a borrowed rifle, that Doc Caldwell would be nearby with his medical bag and a Derringer, just in case. Sarah hated the plan. "It's too dangerous," she said from the bed, Grace sleeping fitfully against her chest. "Voss isn't stupid. He'll know it's a trap. He'll suspect it's a trap. But his arrogance won't let him believe I could actually outsmart him. That's what we're counting on. And if you're wrong, if he just has Coleman arrest you the moment you walk in, then Hale steps in. Federal authority. It'll be messy, but legal." "Messy, that's reassuring," her voice broke. "Eli, I just gave birth. I can't lose you now. Not when we're so close." I sat on the edge of the bed carefully, not wanting to jostle Grace. "You're not going to lose me, I promise." "You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise I'll fight like hell to keep it from happening." Sarah reached out with her free hand. I took it, feeling the strength still in her grip despite everything she'd been through. "When this is over," she said quietly, "when Voss is dealt with and we're safe, I want you to know something." "What?" "I love you. I know it's too soon. I know it doesn't make sense, but I do. And if something happens to you tonight, I needed to say it at least once." The words hit me like a physical blow. Love. I hadn't heard that word directed at me in 2 years. Anna's face flashed through my mind. Her smile, her laugh, the way she used to say those words like they were the easiest thing in the world. And here was Sarah saying them now, not to replace Anna, but to pull me back into the world of the living. "Sarah, The words stuck in my throat, not because they weren't true, but because saying them out loud meant admitting I'd moved on, that the guilt I'd carried for 2 years didn't own me anymore. "You don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know." But I did need to say it, because it was true, because she deserved to hear it, because some things were worth the risk of being hurt again. "I love you too," I said, and felt something break open inside me, something that had been frozen for too long. Don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe when you fixed my jacket, maybe when you stood up to Voss in that courtroom, maybe the first time I heard you scream on that mountain. But it's real, and it's why I have to do this, because I won't let him take anyone else I love. Sarah pulled me closer, and I kissed her, gentle and careful because of Grace between us. A kiss that tasted like tears and hope and promises. "Come back to me," she whispered against my lips. "Always." "Come back to me," she whispered against my lips. "Always." I pulled back and looked at her seriously. "Doc Caldwell and Martha are staying here with you and Grace. If anyone tries to come through that door who isn't me, Joseph, or the marshal, Doc's got his Derringer and Martha's got her shotgun. They know how to use them." "You think Voss might send someone here while you're gone?" "I think Voss is desperate. Desperate men do stupid things, but you'll be protected, I promise." Sarah nodded, though fear still shadowed her eyes. I left as the sun was setting, walking through Gatlinburg streets with my rifle slung over my shoulder. People watched from windows. I could feel their eyes tracking me. The mountain man, the killer, walking toward whatever end was waiting. Voss's office was lit up against the gathering dark. I could see him through the window, sitting at his desk, reading papers. Always papers. As if the weight of his crimes could be buried under enough legal documents. I climbed the steps and knocked. "Come in, Mr. Thorne. I've been expecting you." Of course he had. I pushed through the door to find Voss pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. He slid one across the desk toward an empty chair. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." I sat but didn't touch the whiskey. "I came to talk about your offer, the $20,000 for Sarah." "Did you now? And what changed your mind? Last time we spoke you seemed quite determined to fight." "Sarah nearly died tonight. Giving birth. Baby came 2 months early because of all this stress. When I saw her lying there, saw how close I came to losing her, I realized some fights aren't worth it." Voss studied me with those calculating eyes. "And you think you can convince her to take the money? To sign the agreement? I think she'll do whatever keeps her baby safe, and right now that means ending this. How pragmatic. Voss sipped his whiskey. But forgive me if I'm skeptical. You don't strike me as a man who gives up easily. I'm a man who learns from his mistakes. I didn't protect Anna, got her killed because of my pride. I won't make that mistake with Sarah. Ah, yes, Anna, your late wife. Tell me, Mr. Thorne, do you still blame yourself for her death? Every day. Even though you know I was responsible, that my men killed her? I felt my hands tighten on the chair arms, forced myself to relax. You said things got out of hand, that it was an accident. Did I? Voss smiled. I don't recall saying that exactly. I recall suggesting it might have been an accident. But between you and me, in the privacy of this office, we both know the truth, don't we? What truth is that? That I ordered her death, specifically, deliberately, because you refused to sell me land I wanted, because you had the audacity to tell me no. He leaned forward. I sent those men to your cabin with explicit instructions. Hurt her enough to change your mind. And if she died in the process, well, that would change your mind even faster, wouldn't it? Outside the window, I knew Marshal Hale was listening to every word. Knew this was the confession we needed. But hearing it out loud, hearing Voss admit so casually to murdering Anna, made something snap inside me. I stood up, hand moving toward my rifle. Voss didn't flinch. Go ahead. Shoot me. Prove everyone right about you. Prove you're nothing but a murderer who belongs on a gallows. You killed her. I did, and I'd do it again if I had to, because men like you need to learn their place. You don't tell people like me no. You don't interfere with our plans. You accept what we offer and be grateful for it. I'm going to see you hang for this. Are you? With what proof? Your word against mine? We're alone in this office, Mr. Thorne. No witnesses. And I'll simply deny everything. Say you came here threatening me, that I feared for my life. That's when Marshal Hale kicked in the door, gun drawn. Federal Marshal, you're under arrest, Judge Voss, for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, witness intimidation, and about 6 other charges I'll think of before we get to Nashville. Voss's face went pale, then red. You were listening. You set me up. You set yourself up, Hale said. You just couldn't help bragging about it. Now stand up slowly and put your hands where I can see them. But Voss had one more card to play. He stood, hands rising, then grabbed a bell from his desk and rang it hard. The back door of the office burst open. Sheriff Coleman and 4 deputies rushed in, guns drawn. Sheriff, Voss said smoothly, this man just threatened to kill me. The marshal appears to be helping him. I want them both arrested. Coleman grinned. My pleasure, Judge. You're interfering with a federal arrest, Hale said. That's a felony. Don't know what you're talking about, Marshal. All I see is 2 men threatening an elected judge. Now drop your weapons, or we drop you. I looked at the odds. 7 of them, 2 of us, in a small room with no cover. This was about to get bloody. Then Joseph's voice came from the doorway. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Sheriff. Joseph stood there with his rifle aimed at Coleman's back. Behind him, I could see Doc Caldwell with his Derringer. And behind them, a crowd was gathering. Martha Hayes, the Wilson family. The other families, Voss had cheated. All of them armed, all of them angry. Seems like the whole town's got something to say about this, Joseph said. You really want to start a gunfight with all these witnesses? Coleman's confidence wavered. This is official business. This is corruption, Martha said loudly. We all heard what the judge said, heard him admit to murder, to fraud, and we're done pretending we don't see it. One of Coleman's deputies lowered his gun, then another. They might be willing to follow orders, but they weren't willing to die for a lost cause. Coleman looked at Voss. Voss's mask had finally cracked completely. He looked old suddenly, tired, beaten. It's over, Sheriff, Hale said quietly. You can surrender peacefully, and maybe I'll put in a word with the prosecutor, or you can fight, and we'll add your name to the list of people going to prison. Coleman's gun hand dropped. We surrender. Marshal Hale moved quickly, cuffing both Voss and Coleman. The deputies gave up their weapons without protest. Within minutes, it was done. Marshal Hale moved quickly, cuffing both Voss and Coleman. The deputies gave up their weapons without protest. Within minutes, it was done. As Hale secured the prisoners, I asked, "What about Eleanor Voss, Voss's wife? She was involved in all this too." "Already handled," Hale said. "Arrested her 2 days ago in Nashville. She's dying of cancer, confessed to everything. Ordering the attack on your wife, orchestrating the land fraud, all of it. She's cooperating with federal prosecutors in exchange for dying in a hospital instead of a cell." The news should have brought satisfaction. Instead, I just felt tired. So she gets away with it, gets to die comfortable. She gets to die knowing everyone knows what she did. Sometimes that's the only justice we get. Hale paused. But her testimony puts the final nail in Voss's coffin. He's going away for the rest of his life. The man who'd owned Gatlinburg, who'd killed and stolen and corrupted for years, was in chains. The man who'd owned Gatlinburg, who'd killed and stolen and corrupted for years, was in chains. I walked out of that office into the cold night air and just breathed. It was over. Actually over. Joseph clapped me on the shoulder. "You did it. We did it." Martha was already organizing the crowd, sending people home, talking about what came next. She caught my eye and nodded. Respect. Acknowledgement. I'd been an outcast in this town for 2 years. Now I was something else. Part of the community again. I walked back to the boarding house in a daze, climbed the stairs to Sarah's room, pushed open the door. She was awake, sitting up in bed with Grace in her arms. When she saw me, her face broke into the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen. "You're alive." "I'm alive." "Did it work?" He confessed. To everything. Hale arrested him. "It's over." Sarah started crying. Not sad tears, relief, joy, the release of tension she'd been holding for months. I crossed the room and sat beside her carefully, looked down at Grace, sleeping peacefully now, her tiny chest rising and falling steadily. "She's beautiful," I said. "She is. Doc says she's going to make it, says she's stronger than she looks. Like her mother." Sarah leaned her head against my shoulder. "What happens now?" "Now Voss goes to trial. The other families get their land back. Life goes back to normal, or as normal as it can be." "And us?" I thought about that. About the future that had seemed impossible just hours ago. About Sarah and Grace and the life we could build together. "I was thinking," I said slowly, "maybe I don't go back to the mountain. Maybe I stay here. Open a carpentry shop. Help you with the dress shop you wanted to start. Help raise Grace." "You want to be a father to her? If you'll let me. I know I'm not William. I know I can never replace him. But I love you, Sarah. And I already love that little girl. If you'll have me, I'd like to try." Sarah kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. "I'll have you," she whispered, "for as long as you'll stay." "Then I guess I'm staying." Grace stirred in Sarah's arms, making soft baby noises. Sarah adjusted her gently, and I found myself reaching out to touch one tiny hand. Grace's fingers curled around my thumb instinctively, holding on with surprising strength. And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. 3 months later, spring came to the Smoky Mountains like a promise kept. The snow melted from the high passes. Dogwood bloomed white against the dark forest. Gatlinburg came alive with new energy, new hope. Judge Harlan Voss was convicted on 17 counts of fraud, 4 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, and multiple counts of witness intimidation and corruption. Eleanor Voss, who died in federal custody 3 weeks after her arrest, had provided testimony that sealed his fate. Her confession to ordering Anna Thorne's murder meant Voss faced conspiracy charges for that crime as well. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Sheriff Coleman got 10 years. The deputies were fired but avoided prison by testifying against their bosses. All the families who'd been cheated got their land back. The federal government compensated them for lost income and damage. A new judge was appointed, honest this time. A new sheriff was elected. Gatlinburg was learning to be a real town again instead of one man's private kingdom. Sarah's dress shop opened on Main Street, right next to my carpentry business. We lived in rooms above the shops, a family now, me, Sarah, and Grace, who was thriving. She'd gained weight, gotten chubby and pink and impossibly cute. When she smiled, which was often, it felt like the sun coming out. We got married in June, a simple ceremony in the church with the whole town as witnesses. Joseph served as my best man. Martha stood with Sarah. Doc Caldwell gave Sarah away since her own father had disowned her for refusing to return to Charleston. Grace was there too, dressed in white lace that Sarah had sewn herself, held by Martha during the ceremony. When the Reverend pronounced us husband and wife, Grace made a happy gurgling sound, and everyone laughed. That night, after the celebration ended and we were alone in our home, Sarah and I stood at the window looking out at the town. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The mountain, the solitude." "Sometimes," I admitted. "But this is better, having people, having purpose, having you. We're building something here, the three of us, something real, something that'll last." Grace was asleep in her cradle nearby, her tiny snores the most peaceful sound in the world. Sarah's hand found mine, our fingers interlacing naturally. "I never thought I'd be happy again," Sarah said quietly. "After William died, I thought that was it, that I'd just exist until I didn't. But you changed that. You showed me that life goes on, that love can happen more than once, that second chances are real. You did the same for me. I was dead up on that mountain, just breathing but not living. You brought me back." We stood there in comfortable silence, watching our town sleep, listening to our daughter breathe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, a business to run, a child to raise, a community to be part of. But tomorrow was tomorrow. Tonight, we had this moment, this peace, this love that neither of us had expected but both of us needed. The mountains still stood outside our window, eternal and strong. But they weren't a hiding place anymore. They were just mountains, beautiful and wild, and part of the landscape we called home. I'd climbed them to escape life. I'd come down to live it. And standing there with Sarah's hand in mine and Grace sleeping nearby, I finally understood what Anna would have wanted for me. Not to grieve forever, not to punish myself with isolation, but to live, to love, to build something from the ashes of loss. "I love you," I said to Sarah. "I love you too." Grace stirred in her sleep, making soft baby sounds. Sarah moved to check on her, and I followed. We stood together looking down at this tiny person we'd created a family around, this little girl who'd brought us together and given us both a reason to keep fighting. "She's going to have a good life," Sarah whispered. "We'll make sure of it. The best life we can give her." Outside, the night was clear and full of stars. Inside, our home was warm and safe and filled with love. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was, but it was ours. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The end.